So welcome. It's good to have you with us, Astrology. I'm glad that you're here. You know me, I'm Phaedra. If there's other folks on the broadcast or who might be catching the replay who don't know me, I'm the astrologer and artist of Mystick, Physick, Astrology, and I use Western Sidereal astrology in my broadcast. And really the aim is to provide guidance on how you can use the energy of the transiting planets to affect your lives in a positive way. Because if you know your transits are coming, you can be more conscious and proactive about how you navigate them rather than just kind of being buffeted about by what's happening astrologically in the solar system. So I put a link in the comments if you need to look up your sidereal sign placements. There's a link to the online calculator at Mystick, Physick, Astrology /sidereal tools. It's free. You're going to want to know your ascendant sign and degree, your sun sign and degree, and you're going to want to know if you have planets or points as some specific signs and degrees that we're going to talk about here in a little bit more detail. But on this particular broadcast, we're going to be talking about the full moon lunar eclipse in Gemini and how you can best put this lunar eclipse to work for you. We're going to talk about the Gemini archetype and the themes that may be most relevant for you right now, especially because it's eclipse energy. And we're going to help recognize where you may have been getting bogged down in details or getting bogged down in telling a story. And we're going to release old outmoded thinking, which doesn't serve us any longer, which doesn't serve our highest and best good, so that we can kind of open our lives up. The idea is we want to open up to new experiences, to new surroundings, to new avenues, to achieving what we want. And the eclipse time is a really wonderful time to do that. And I didn't have the sound on earlier. Apparently, I didn't have the mic plugged in all the way. But I had lit one of my little charcoal discs so that I could have some incense with tonight's practice, and my disc is ready, so I'm going to go ahead and put my incense on it if you don't mind. I have frankincense tears, and I have some myrrh resin, amber resin that I wanted to burn with this broadcast. And so I'm just going to get these set on the disc if you don't mind. And I invite you to, anytime you're doing a new moon intention setting or doing a releasing practice, give your space some attention before you get started. Get it ready energetically. I like to spend some time doing that kind of prep before we get started. So there's my, oh wait, I got to put my amber resin on here. I love the smell of amber resin. It's really amazing. It's really amazing. I like to use it very sparingly, so I don't overdo it. Anyway, so grab a pen, grab a piece of paper, grab maybe something to start a fire with if you're so inclined. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on. And we're going to use this full moon to let go. So the first part of the broadcast, I'm going to talk about this particular full moon and the energy of it and the astrology of it. And that's what I had just gotten finished talking about when Balaji let me know that there was no audio on your end. So I'm glad that you jumped in here. So second part of the broadcast, we'll talk about which house this is falling in for each of you according to your sidereal rising sign and what the themes of that house are. And then in the third part of the broadcast, we'll talk more in depth about the archetype of Gemini, the themes of Gemini, and we have some prompts for you to consider as you decide what it is you want to move past or let go of tonight. But let's talk first about this full moon, and we'll dive right in. So we kind of have to set the stage here. So it's not just significant that this is a full moon. It's not just significant that it's a lunar eclipse. Oh, your rising sign is Virgo. Okay, so you'll feel it because barring other planets with greater weight or bearing in your chart, Balaji, that would make Mercury your chart ruler, and he's also the ruler of this eclipse, and so that can be particularly powerful for you. And I think I talk about that a little bit later on, specifically for folks who have stuff going on with Pisces and Virgo, how this could be potentially a little bit more challenging full moon for you. But as we talk about this full moon lunar eclipse, we kind of have to set the stage. So January, I wrote about this in the column, and then the column hasn't been published because I didn't quite finish everything that I wanted to write about. So I do apologize for that. This is a month of transition. The hallmark of January 2020, the astrological signature of January 2020 is a signature of transition, of change, of the ending of cycles and the beginnings of cycles. And it's a lot of different cycles that we're talking about because there is so much conjunction activity. If you have the opportunity, go back and watch the very last Sidereal Insights Astro update that I did. I think it was the December 30th broadcast. I talk about conjunction cycles a little bit more and how conjunctions are very powerful aspects. I would dare say the most powerful aspect that we're concerned about in astrology, because it's a combining of energies of all the planets involved in the conjunction. Their energies kind of meld and enhance each other, and it can be for good or ill, right? This can have a resonance kind of effect, or it can have a dissonance kind of effect in that sort of way, if you want to give it those kinds of terms. So January is loaded with conjunctions, and some of them are conjunctions that just don't frankly happen very often. And so it's one cycle after another coming to a close, coming to a close, coming to a close, and then the new ones beginning and opening up as we move through the month. Okay. And it begins with our Mercury-Jupiter conjunction that we had on the 2nd of January. Excuse me. Of course, I didn't bring anything to drink at this broadcast, and I've just lit incense in my office and made it all smoky. So that's really the kickoff party for January, that Mercury-Jupiter conjunction. And I don't necessarily want to spend a lot of time on that, but what I want to do is preface the talk about tomorrow's conjunction, because it is exact tomorrow, 2:21, I believe, Eastern Standard Time is when our conjunction, or our lunar eclipse is exact. But leading into that, just today, we have Venus moving into Aquarius. This is kind of a preliminary setting the stage of the energy, and it's important because Venus is moving into an air sign, and this is a lunar eclipse in an air sign. Excuse me. And Venus is going to be involved in this lunar eclipse, as we'll see, as we talk about these aspects and how they unfold. And so with her moving into Aquarius, that's the beginning kind of setting the stage of what it is, several days of astrological activity unfolding all at once. And so these are very significant energies. They each have their own distinct signatures. However, because they're taking place at one time, the energies are going to be very, very blended. And so the events that transpire, it's really, we're going to talking about them as though they're isolated aspects, but they're really not. And you would be hard pressed to tease out the isolated things that each of these astrological signatures that we're going to talk about represents. It all is interwoven like a tapestry, and that's how we're going to experience these things unfold as we move through January, and especially as we move through the next couple of days. So Venus making her entrance into Aquarius, fellow air sign, with Gemini, that takes place on the 9th of January. That's today. She's going to be there for 3.5 weeks in Aquarius. Uranus also moves into position, and those two are going to kind of flavor this lunar eclipse with a touch of the unexpected. Okay, now on the 10th, the day of the eclipse, we have Uranus stationing direct. And so this is a relevant thing to know as we move in. So this starts the beginning of a several week-long period that we've been experiencing at the beginning of every year over these most recent cycles, where we have all of the planets in the solar system in direct motion at one time. And as far as new moons go, that can be a particularly fortuitous time, potentially, depending on what other aspects and astrological energy is going on. It could be a really fortuitous time to make an initiation, right, during the new moons that fall within that window. Right now, we're dealing with a full moon that falls in that window, specifically one that happens the exact day that Uranus stations, and that's a very powerful signature of this particular full moon. And so this is really relevant for folks who might have a planet or personal point near 7 or 8 degrees of Aquarius, or if you have Gemini, Virgo, or Aries sun or rising sign, right? Because Uranus is going to station direct at 7 degrees 38 minutes of Aries. Uranus being the planet of accidents, of surprises, of sudden events, and sudden reversals of fortune. Okay? So something quite unexpected or out of the blue could take place with this full moon, and for some folks it could benefit you in an unexpected way. Okay? So you do, what do you have there, Balaji? I'm curious now. Mercury at 7 degrees Aquarius, your chart ruler and ruler of Virgo. Okay, so this date, this January 10th date, is important for you for sure. The lunar eclipse in Gemini coming the same day, this really places the emphasis on the truth coming out, and sudden changes in dynamics that can trigger. Okay. This is a truth when we're talking about this particular eclipse, we're talking about truths that could just change everything, right? This is an eclipse. This is really going to shine a light on our words, on our communications. It's going to remind us that words have consequences, right? And it doesn't really matter if those words come from impulsively speaking your mind or speaking your truth, or if they're deceptive, or if they're dishonest, or if they're meant to confuse or obscure our access to information or knowledge. All of those kinds of words have consequences, and words can't be taken back once you speak them, right? So this is important to keep in mind as we navigate. Watch for what you need to know to be brought to your attention before you make a decision or before you commit to a particular course of action. We know that eclipses bring information to light. They reveal secrets and hidden information. And these are always secrets and hidden information that you need in order to make a decision or choose a particular path forward. So don't rush. Don't be in too much of a hurry. Let the eclipse reveal its information before you make a decision, before you commit. Okay, be patient, be aware of the details. Don't speak impatiently or off the cuff. Don't make impulsive promises. Any of those things could come back to haunt you. Okay, we're really moving through a period of time where the truth coming out really could change everything. Communications are going to come under scrutiny for possible deception and for possible dishonesty, for possible lies, and folks who have either relied on those tactics, i.e. used them, or benefited from those tactics, either indirectly, are going to very clearly see the weaknesses of doing that. The weakness of doing that is going to become glaringly apparent as this unfolds. And so be aware of that, be cognizant of that, and just be ready for the entire picture to shift quite suddenly as information is made available to you, or made as you're made aware of it. And this is also really a time to let go of the stories that we tell, right? This is a good time to let go of the stories that we tell about ourselves, about those around us, the narratives, right? Especially narratives that just aren't serving us any longer. And instead, let the evidence speak for itself, okay? Especially the evidence of our actions, the evidence of our behaviors. Be really discerning, and don't be so quick to give people's words a lot of weight, or to put a lot of stock in what you've been told or what you're being told right now. I certainly wouldn't sign any contracts anytime soon. Like, let this play out a bit before you do anything like that. So folks with a planet or point at 25 degrees of Gemini or any air or fire sign are going to feel this eclipse personally, as are those who have a Gemini sun or Gemini rising. If you have a planet or point at 25 degrees of Pisces or Virgo, this applies to you, Balaji. The eclipse is going to be more challenging, and it could bring up themes of escapism. It could bring up themes of perfectionism. However, I will say that with a willingness to change, this eclipse could also offer a chance for you to seek a kind of a realistic balance that supports a life of well-being. You have Rahu in Gemini. The hungry, hungry Rahu in Gemini. Are you hungering for the truth, Balaji? Do you have an appetite for the truth? So January 12th, just as we come out of the eclipse, we bump up into this big Saturn-Pluto conjunction that everyone in the astrological world has been talking about for years now, right? Are you tired of us talking about it? We probably won't be done talking about it for a couple of months. So Mercury, he's been out of bounds for a while. he's busy making all these connections with other planets just as he comes back inbounds. And it happens kind of all month long. First, like I was saying with Jupiter, as the month opens, where he's really activating commerce, activating communication channels, activating transportation, moving things around. Pieces of the puzzle are shifting into place with that conjunction, right? And then he conjoins with the sun, of course, at the full moon, and then Saturn and Pluto right after he conjoins the sun, as those three planets kind of all meet up in Sagittarius to form this really powerful triple conjunction. Now, Saturn and Pluto are slower moving planets, right? Pluto especially is generational as an outer planet. And so this Saturn-Pluto conjunction is one that only happens once every 35 years or so on average, usually every 33 to 38 years, depending on the retrograde cycles that we're talking about. So the Saturn-Pluto lineup is one that lends itself to political upheaval. It tends to bring long-awaited changes to power structures. That's something that you could potentially notice in your own life. Those are a few examples of the more general influence that this particular conjunction can have. And because Pluto, like I was saying, is considered generational in nature, its share of the effect in this conjunction is likely to be felt in a more broader and generalized sense for most people. Now, of course, that's not going to be the case for folks who have Scorpio sun or rising, or who have Pluto as a chart ruler, or who have a planet or point at 27 or 28 degrees of Sagittarius, because that's where this conjunction is taking place. So if you do have a planet or point at 27 or 28 degrees of Sagittarius, you're going to feel Saturn-Pluto conjoining quite personally. I can vouch for that. I'm experiencing it on my descendant, and it's been a theme in my life for the entire past year, and probably for the coming 6 to 12 months as I adjust to the changes that it has brought in my life. And those of you who are experiencing it personally are probably experiencing kind of a similar time frame for the unfolding of those events. However, each of these different conjunctions that's taking place in January unfolds on a different timetable, and we're going to experience them that way. They will unfold on different lengths of time. So just note that the effect of a Saturn-Pluto conjunction can play out over 18 months before or after the exact aspect. So we've been feeling it for quite some time, and we will continue to feel it all throughout this year and well into next year as it kind of unwinds and plays itself out. Okay. But the relevant themes are really going to revolve around changes to power structures, struggles for control, struggles for influence, complete structural transformation of a system or some other construct in your life. Something that you thought was going to last for a really long time. Okay. And then, of course, the very next day, January 13th, the sun comes traversing that three-planet lineup. She hits Saturn, she hits Pluto, he hits, just as Mercury's entering Capricorn. Okay, so January 13th, all these details and agreements and truths and deceptions and all of this stuff that's been in the air, in the mix through the lunar eclipse, all of it's really going to come under close scrutiny on the 13th when the sun hits those planets. Okay, when the sun follows Mercury's lead and kind of drives over Saturn and Pluto. And so that's a time frame when we really could be seeing changes in leadership. You could see that changes in leadership are called for suddenly, and that the reasons would be quite clear if that's the case. Mercury moves into Capricorn that same day. Now, this is important and notable because Mercury's ruling our lunar eclipse, right? Mercury's been transiting Sagittarius, where he is in, he's debilitated, right? So we have to be careful about taking people at their word. We have to be careful about false promises. We have to be careful about exaggerations. We have to be careful with Mercury, excuse me, as he finishes up his transit of Sagittarius. As he moves into Capricorn, keeping in mind, this is where you joined us, I think, before Balaji. As he moves into Capricorn, he's moving into the sign that has to do with consequences, right? And so for 2.5 weeks, Mercury is going to be moving through Capricorn, and we will really see exactly how and why words can have consequences, and why even seemingly the small details matter. Even the small details are important. So recalling, of course, the eclipses have an influences of up to 2 months before or after the eclipse event, right? So this means some folks will have already received their eclipse news either in December or November, or they'll receive it in February or March. But the bulk of us will be getting our news last week and this coming week, especially so if the natal chart shows a planet or point at 25 degrees of an air or fire sign, Gemini, Libra, or Aquarius, Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius, or if you have Gemini rising, or if you have, if you're born in the days around July 11th, especially because this eclipse would be happening right near or on top of your sun. And so for a very small percentage of folks, like I was saying, at 30 and 60 days, you get your news, but most of us are going to get it right around now. So have your antenna up, have your eyes peeled, your ears open, because we're going to be finding out what's in store in the coming week if we haven't found out already. So be sure to check your chart for those planets and points at those particular degrees. And really planets or points up to 5 degrees either side could be impacted by the eclipse and by all of these conjunction cycles, which are closely entwined with the eclipse. So remember, eclipses bring change beyond our power to control, for better or worse, right? It demands that we adapt to these new circumstances. And you're going to want to watch for that news. And I will warn you, for most of us, it's change that's been a long time coming. It's really change that we've been avoiding or putting off in some way. You've been planning to write a book. That's exciting. That's a perfect thing to do. When we're talking about Gemini, Sagittarius eclipses, absolutely. I would definitely encourage that. That could be a life-changing task if you undertake it. That pretty well wraps up part 1, where we talk about the eclipse energy itself and our current transits. Balaji says actually publishing in January. And, oh, see, that's perfect. Because it's really in line with this particular full moon, which is the giving birth of something into the world. That's a perfect thing to be timing with the full moon. So absolutely, what a fantastic eclipse event to be experiencing. That's really, really cool.